when she slid under the blanket and said, "Just go with it," the night took an unexpected turn. Ryan had been best friends with Jake since middle school. Breaths. They'd been through everything together. Failed tests, first heartbreaks, college applications, and now navigating their late 20s in the real world. Jake had a younger sister named Lisa who Ryan had known practically her entire life. Grasp. When she was a kid with braces and pigtails, Ryan was the annoying older guy who'd steal cookies from their kitchen. Now Lisa was 27, working as a graphic designer, and honestly, Ryan still saw her as Jake's little sister. Nothing more, nothing less. That Friday evening, Ryan was staying at Jake's place for the weekend. His own apartment lease was ending, and he needed a few days to finalize paperwork on a new place across town. Jake had offered up his couch without hesitation, the way real friends do. They'd planned to spend the weekend watching basketball, ordering too much food, and catching up properly since both their schedules had been crazy lately. Around 8 in the evening, Jake's phone rang. Ryan could tell from his friend's face that something was wrong. Jake's boss was calling about an emergency situation at their main office in another city. A server had crashed, and since Jake was their lead IT guy, they needed him there immediately. Jake looked genuinely torn, apologizing repeatedly to Ryan, but Ryan waved him off, telling him to go handle business. They'd catch up another time. Besides, Ryan was perfectly fine spending a quiet weekend alone in the apartment, maybe finally finishing that book he'd started 3 months ago. Jake rushed around packing a bag, still apologizing as he headed out the door. The apartment fell silent after he left. Ryan ordered some Chinese food, found a movie on Netflix, and settled into the comfortable couch. This wasn't so bad, actually. Breaths. Sometimes a quiet evening alone was exactly what a person needed. Around 10 at night, there was a knock at the door. Ryan wasn't expecting anyone. He looked through the peephole and saw Lisa standing there, looking upset and completely soaked from the rain that had started pouring outside. He quickly opened the door. Lisa stood there, dripping wet, mascara smudged under her eyes, looking absolutely miserable. Before Ryan could ask what happened, she started explaining. She'd had a huge fight with her roommate about bills and cleaning responsibilities. Things had escalated badly, and her roommate had said some really hurtful things. Lisa had grabbed her bag and left, not wanting to spend another second in that apartment, around in the rain for an hour, trying to figure out where to go when she remembered Jake mentioning that Ryan was staying over this weekend. Ryan immediately ushered her inside, grabbing a towel from the bathroom. He explained that Jake had left for an emergency work trip, but assured her she was welcome to stay. Lisa looked relieved, thanking him repeatedly. Ryan made her some hot tea while she changed into dry clothes from her bag. They sat in the kitchen, and Lisa vented about her roommate situation. Ryan listened, offering the occasional comment but mostly just being there, which was exactly what she needed. After she'd calmed down, they moved to the living room. The tension from earlier had faded, and they fell into easier conversation. They talked about work, about how weird it was being adults with real problems like rent and taxes. Lisa reminded Ryan of the time he'd accidentally locked himself out of Jake's house wearing only swim trunks, and they both laughed at the memory. Hours passed without either of them noticing. Around midnight, they realized they should probably sleep. That's when the practical problem presented itself. Break. Jake's bedroom door was locked since he kept expensive computer equipment in there, and there was only the one couch in the living room. Ryan immediately said he'd take the floor, but Lisa protested. Perhaps. The couch was big enough for 2 people, and they weren't kids anymore. It would be fine. Brian hesitated, but Lisa had a point. They'd known each other for 15 years. This wasn't weird. It was just 2 old friends, sharing a couch for one night. Brian's desk He grabbed a spare blanket from the hall closet, and they arranged themselves on opposite ends of the couch, feet almost touching in the middle. They said goodnight, turned off the lights, and tried to sleep. For a while, everything was fine. Ryan lay there listening to the rain against the windows, feeling himself drift off. This weekend hadn't gone as planned. But it wasn't bad. Just different. Unexpected things happen in life. You just roll with them. Ryan woke up shivering. He wasn't sure what time it was, but the apartment felt like a freezer. His breath was almost visible in the air. Something had clearly gone wrong with the heating system. He sat up carefully, trying not to disturb Lisa, and checked his phone. 2 a.m. Great. He remembered seeing an extra blanket in the hall closet earlier. Moving quietly in the darkness, he made his way there and found a thick comforter pushed to the back of the shelf. As he pulled it out, he heard Lisa stir on the couch. She sat up, rubbing her eyes and immediately wrapping her arms around herself. Even in the dim light from the street lamps outside, Ryan could see she was shivering too. The thin blanket she'd been using clearly wasn't enough. Ryan stood there holding the thick comforter, suddenly unsure what to do. Perhaps he could offer it to Lisa and go back to his thin blanket. That would be the gentlemanly thing to do. But before he could say anything, Lisa noticed him standing there. She was still half asleep, her hair messy and her eyes barely open. Without saying a word, she lifted the edge of her blanket and patted the couch cushion next to her. He glances around in displace. Her voice was quiet and sleepy when she spoke. It's freezing in here. Psst, just share this one. We'll be warmer together. Ryan hesitated. Something about the situation felt different than before, though he couldn't quite put his finger on why. They'd already been sharing the couch anyway, just at opposite ends. This was just about staying warm. Practical. Simple. Lisa must have sensed his hesitation because she opened one eye and looked at him directly. Just go with it. We're adults. It's just body heat. I'm too cold to care about anything else right now. There was logic in what she said. Ryan had been camping enough times to know that sharing warmth was the smart thing to do in cold situations. He nodded, though she probably couldn't see it in the darkness, and carefully settled onto the couch next to her. Breath. He spread the thick comforter over both of them, and immediately the difference was noticeable. The combined warmth of two people under a proper blanket made everything more bearable. They lay there in silence for a few minutes. Ryan tried to maintain some distance, staying as close to the edge of the couch as physically possible without falling off. But the couch wasn't really designed for two adults to sleep separately. Their shoulders touched. Then their arms. The space was just too small to avoid it. Lisa shifted slightly, trying to get comfortable, and somehow they ended up even closer. Ryan could smell her shampoo, something floral that he'd probably noticed 100 times before but never really paid attention to. Now, in the quiet darkness with the rain still falling outside, he was acutely aware of every small detail. His heart was beating faster than normal. He told himself it was just the cold, the sudden wake-up, the strangeness of the situation, but deep down he knew something had shifted. Breath. This didn't feel like sharing a couch with Jake's little sister anymore. This felt like something else entirely. Braving had evened out. She'd fallen back asleep, or at least she seemed to have. Ryan lay there wide awake, staring at the ceiling and listening to the rain. His mind was racing with thoughts he'd never had before, or maybe thoughts he'd had but never acknowledged. When had Lisa stopped being just his best friend's younger sister? When had she become a person he noticed in a completely different way? He remembered seeing her at Jake's birthday party a few months ago. She'd been laughing at someone's joke, her whole face lighting up, and Ryan had caught himself staring. He dismissed it immediately, chalking it up to the beer he'd been drinking. But now, in this moment, he wondered if he'd been lying to himself. Lisa shifted again in her sleep, and her hand fell across his chest. Ryan froze completely. Breath. His heart was pounding so loud he was sure she could hear it. He didn't move, didn't even breathe properly, just lay there with her hand resting over his heart. This was ridiculous. They were just two people trying to stay warm during a heating malfunction. That's all this was. There was no reason for his pulse to be racing, or for his mind to be going in these directions. He'd known Lisa since she was a kid. This was Jake's sister. His best friend's sister. The lines were clear, had always been clear. But lying there in the darkness, with her breathing softly beside him and the weight of her hand on his chest, those lines suddenly seemed blurry. Everything felt different. The night had taken a turn he never could have predicted when he'd woken up cold and gone looking for that blanket. Break. When Ryan woke up the next morning, early sunlight was streaming through the windows. His first awareness was of warmth, then of the awkward position his neck was in, and finally of the fact that Lisa was still asleep next to him, her head somehow having ended up on his shoulder during the night. He carefully extracted himself, moving slowly so he wouldn't wake her. His mind felt foggy, a mix of poor sleep and the strange awareness that had kept him up half the night. He needed coffee, breath, and space to think. And maybe to splash some cold water on his face and get his head straight. In the kitchen, he busied himself making coffee, trying to focus on the simple, normal task. The heating had apparently fixed itself during the night because the apartment felt warm again. Everything was back to normal. Except it wasn't, and Ryan knew it. He heard movement from the living room and braced himself. Lisa appeared in the doorway, her hair pulled up in a messy bun, still wearing the oversized sweater she'd slept in. She looked tired and a little uncertain. They said good morning, but it came out awkward from both of them. The easy comfort they'd had last night while talking and laughing felt like it belonged to different people. Now there was this weird tension hanging in the air between them. Ryan poured 2 cups of coffee, and they sat at the kitchen table. The silence stretched out uncomfortably. Lisa added sugar to her coffee. Ryan stared at his phone, not really reading anything. Both of them were avoiding eye contact. Finally, after what felt like an hour but was probably only 10 minutes, Lisa set down her coffee cup with a decisive clink. Okay, we need to talk about last night. Ryan's stomach dropped. Here it was. She was going to address the elephant in the room, and he had no idea what to say. He looked up at her, trying to keep his expression neutral. Lisa took a breath and continued. I know we've been friends forever. You're Jake's best friend, and I'm Jake's sister, and that's how it's always been. But something felt different last night. When we were on the couch, I mean. Am I completely crazy for thinking that? Ryan felt relief wash over him. She'd felt it too. He wasn't losing his mind. But along with the relief came a new wave of anxiety, because now they actually had to deal with this. Round. In despair, she ran his hand through his hair, a nervous habit he'd never been able to break. No, you're not crazy. I felt it too. I was awake for hours thinking about it, actually. They sat there looking at each other, both seeming to wait for the other to say what came next. Finally, Ryan spoke again. But this is complicated, Lisa. Really complicated. She nodded, wrapping both hands around her coffee mug. I know. Trust me, I've been thinking about all the complications since the moment I woke up. They started listing them out loud, as if saying them would make everything clearer. Jake would absolutely lose his mind if anything happened between them. Their entire friend group would be affected because Ryan and Jake's friends had become Lisa's friends over the years, too.
They'd known each other since Lisa was 13 years old, which felt weird to even think about in this context.
What if they tried something and it didn't work out? They'd lose the friendship they'd had for years. The conversation went in circles for over an hour. Every time one of them would start to say maybe it was worth exploring, the other would bring up another reason why it was a terrible idea. But underneath all the logical arguments and practical concerns, there was something neither of them could quite dismiss. That pull, that awareness, that feeling that something significant had shifted between them. Lisa brought up past relationships, how she'd dated guys who seemed great on paper, but something was always missing. Ryan admitted he'd been single for almost a year because nobody he met seemed to click with him the way he needed them to. Neither of them said it directly, but the implication hung in the air. Maybe the reason other people didn't measure up was because they'd been unconsciously comparing everyone else to someone who'd been there all along. Around noon, Lisa said she should probably go. She needed to deal with her roommate situation, maybe look at some new apartment listings. They both knew she was also suggesting space, time to think clearly without being in the same room. Ryan agreed, maybe too quickly. Space sounded good. They could both step back, get some perspective, figure out if this was real or just a weird moment brought on by circumstances. Lisa packed her things while Ryan washed their coffee mugs, both of them moving around the apartment carefully, maintaining distance. When she was ready to leave, they stood at the door facing each other. The goodbye felt loaded with everything they hadn't quite said. Lisa moved in for a hug and Ryan returned it. It should have been simple, the kind of hug they'd shared dozens of times over the years. But this one lasted a moment longer than necessary. Ryan could feel Lisa's heartbeat, quick and uncertain, matching his own. When they pulled apart, Lisa looked up at him. "I guess we'll figure this out somehow." Ryan nodded. "Yeah, we will." She walked out, and he closed the door behind her, leaning against it and letting out a long breath. The apartment felt too quiet, suddenly. Too empty. Brian realized with a sinking feeling that figuring this out was going to be a lot harder than either of them had acknowledged. The next week was one of the longest of Ryan's life. Despero, he went through the motions at work, signed the lease on his new apartment, helped his parents with some house repairs they needed. But his mind was always somewhere else. Every time his phone buzzed, his heart would jump, hoping it was a message from Lisa. And every time it wasn't, he felt a disappointment that told him everything he needed to know about how he really felt. Brit. He caught himself starting to text her at least a dozen times. He'd type out something casual, trying to sound normal, then read it over and realized there was nothing normal about any of this anymore. He'd delete the message and put his phone away, only to pick it up again 20 minutes later and start the whole cycle over. His coworkers noticed he was distracted. His mom asked if everything was okay, when he'd barely touched dinner at their house. Ryan gave vague answers about work stress and apartment hunting, but the truth sat heavy in his chest. He'd fallen for someone he'd known for 15 years, and he had no idea what to do about it. On Wednesday, Jake called. Ryan almost didn't answer, feeling guilty even though nothing had actually happened.
But not answering would be weird, so he picked up and tried to sound normal.
Jake was still out of town dealing with the work situation. He asked how Ryan's apartment hunt went, complained about hotel food, mentioned he'd talked to Lisa and she'd told him about the roommate drama. Ryan's heart stopped for a moment. But Jake just asked if Ryan had minded her crashing there that night. Ryan said of course not, keeping his voice steady, and the conversation moved on. After they hung up, Ryan felt worse. Jake trusted him completely. They'd been brothers in everything but blood for over 15 years, and here Ryan was, having feelings for Jake's sister that he couldn't shake no matter how hard he tried. D. Thursday evening, Ryan was at the gym trying to work out his frustration on the treadmill when his phone buzzed with a text. He almost ignored it, but something made him look. It was from Lisa. The message was short. I made a list. Pros and cons. Talked to my therapist about it. Spent a week trying to convince myself this is a bad idea. But I can't stop thinking about you. And not as Jake's friend. Break. As you. Ryan stopped the treadmill so abruptly he nearly fell. He read the message 3 times, his hands shaking slightly. She'd been going through the same thing he had. The same overthinking, the same trying to talk herself out of it, the same inability to let it go. He sat down on a bench, not caring that he was sweaty and breathing hard. He typed back, I've been doing the same thing. Every logical part of my brain says this is complicated and risky. But I can't stop thinking about you either. Her response came quickly. So what do we do? Ryan stared at that question for a long time. What did they do? Breath. They could keep ignoring it, go back to being just friends, pretend that night never happened. Eventually the feelings would fade, probably. Or they could take a risk on something that scared both of them but felt more real than anything Ryan had felt in years. He thought about all the relationships he'd been in that felt safe and predictable and ultimately went nowhere. He thought about the advice he'd give his best friend if Jake were in this situation. He thought about Lisa's smile, her laugh, the way she'd looked at him in that moment at the door when she was leaving, like she was hoping he'd ask her to stay. Ryan typed out his response. I think we take the leap. I think we see where this goes. Not as a secret, but for real. We tell Jake together. We deal with whatever comes. Because the biggest risk isn't trying and failing, it's never trying and spending the rest of my life wondering what if. 3 dots appeared, showing Lisa was typing. They disappeared, appeared again. Finally, her message came through. Coffee tomorrow. Our usual place. We can figure out how to do this right. Ryan smiled for the first time all week.
I'll be there. That night he actually slept well.
The anxiety that had been keeping him up was replaced by something else. Nervousness, yes, but also excitement, or hope. The sense that sometimes the scariest decisions are the ones most worth making. Friday morning, Ryan got to the coffee shop 15 minutes early. He ordered his usual black coffee and sat at their regular table by the window. He watched people walking by outside, couples holding hands, someone walking a dog, normal life happening all around him while he sat there waiting for a conversation that would change everything. Lisa arrived exactly at 10. The spacement. She looked nervous too, fidgeting with her car keys as she walked in. But when their eyes met, she smiled, and Ryan felt that same certainty he'd felt when typing his message last night. They ordered their drinks and sat down. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Lisa reached across the table and took his hand. I'm scared, she admitted, but I think this is worth being scared for. Ryan squeezed her hand. I think so too. They spent 2 hours in that coffee shop mapping out how they'd handle everything. They decided honesty was the only way forward. They'd tell Jake together face to face as soon as he got back from his work trip. No hiding, no sneaking around. If they were going to do this, they'd do it right. Lisa talked about her concerns. She worried that if things didn't work out, Ryan would choose Jake over her, and she'd lose both of them. Ryan admitted he worried about the same thing, but from the other side. They made a promise to each other right there. Whatever happened, they'd communicate openly. They'd be kind to each other, and they'd protect their friendship even if the romance didn't work. They also acknowledged the weirdness factor. Ryan had known Lisa since she was a kid. Brave. They both agreed. That felt strange to think about. But Lisa pointed out that they'd only really gotten to know each other as adults in the past few years. The person she was now, the person he'd developed feelings for, was someone he'd met as an equal, not as his best friend's little sister. Before they left the coffee shop, they decided to take things slow. No rushing into anything. They'd go on actual dates, get to know each other in this new context, see if what they felt was real or just the excitement of something forbidden and new. Their first real date was dinner at a small restaurant across town where they wouldn't run into anyone they knew. It felt strange at first, sitting across from each other in a romantic setting instead of their usual casual hangouts. But once they got past the initial awkwardness, conversation flowed like it always had. They talked about everything. Dreams and fears and embarrassing stories. Ryan told her about the time he'd accidentally sent a text complaining about his boss to his boss. Lisa shared her worst first date story, which involved a guy who brought his mother along without warning. By the end of the night, walking Lisa to her car, Ryan felt certain this was right. Bration. When he kissed her goodnight, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Terrifying and new, yes, but also like something that had been waiting to happen for longer than either of them had realized. They went on 3 more dates before Jake came back to town. Each one felt easier, more comfortable. The nervousness faded, replaced by a growing certainty that this was real. They weren't just caught up in a moment, drowned in despair. When Jake finally returned, they invited him to lunch. Ryan had never been so nervous in his life. They sat down at a restaurant, ordered food, made small talk about Jake's work trip. Then Ryan and Lisa exchanged a look, and Lisa took the lead. She told Jake that something had happened while he was away. She explained it carefully, honestly, not making excuses but also not apologizing for having feelings. She told him that she and Ryan were seeing each other, that it was new but real, and that his blessing would mean everything, but they understood if he needed time to process. Jake sat there silently for what felt like an eternity. He looked at Ryan, then at Lisa, then back at Ryan. Breath. Finally, he leaned back in his chair and let out a long breath. "I'd be lying if I said I didn't see this coming eventually," he admitted. "Bration. You two have always had this thing, this way of understanding each other. I just figured you were both too stubborn to notice." Ryan felt relief flood through him. "But, so you're okay with this?" Jake shrugged. "I need some time to get used to the idea. And I'm going to have some ground rules. Like I never want to hear details about anything, ever. And if you two break up, I'm not picking sides. I'm staying out of it completely. You'll both have to figure that out without dragging me into it." Lisa laughed, almost crying with relief. "Deal." Over the next few weeks, they told their friend group. Reactions were mixed. Some people were surprised. A few had apparently suspected for a while. Everyone had opinions, but ultimately, people were supportive. The relationship that had started with an unexpected night on a couch was becoming real, public, acknowledged. 3 months later, Ryan and Lisa were sitting on her apartment couch. Browned, indispensable she'd found a new place after finally moving out from her old roommate situation. They were watching a movie, sharing a blanket even though the heating worked perfectly fine. Lisa paused the movie and turned to Ryan. You know what I was thinking about today? What's that? That night when I showed up at Jake's place in the rain. When I told you to just go with it and get under the blanket. I was so tired and cold I wasn't really thinking. But looking back, maybe some part of me knew. Maybe I was giving us both permission to stop pretending there wasn't something there. Ryan smiled, pulling her closer. Best impulsive decision you ever made. Second best, she corrected. The best one was texting you that Thursday night and deciding to take the leap. They sat there in comfortable silence, the movie forgotten. Ryan thought about how strange life was, how one unexpected night could change everything. How sometimes the person you're meant to be with is someone who's been there all along, and you just needed the right moment to see them clearly. His phone buzzed with a text from Jake. You two want to come over for game night tomorrow. And yes, I'm getting used to thinking of you as a unit. Still weird, though. Ryan showed the text to Lisa, and they both laughed. It was weird. It was complicated. It was unexpected. But it was also real and right and exactly where they were supposed to be. Sometimes the best things in life come from the moments when you stop overthinking and just go with it. When you take the leap even though you're scared. When you let yourself feel something real instead of talking yourself out of it. Because it's complicated. That night on the couch when Lisa had slid under the blanket and told Ryan to just go with it, neither of them could have predicted where it would lead. But looking back now, Ryan wouldn't change a single thing. Breaths. The unexpected turns, the scary conversations, the risk of it all. Every bit of it was worth it to end up right here, right now, with the person who understood him better than anyone else in the world.